Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Navigating Cow Manager webinar. Ray Niebel will begin here shortly, and then after that we will have a question and answer session at the end of his session. Here's what your GoToMeeting control panel should look like on your desktop. The Grab tab can be used to minimize the screen by pressing the red button with the arrow, which looks like this right here. This is also how you would maximize the control panel if it were to be minimized. The audio pane can be used to change your audio setting quickly and easily. We will have more information on the next slide. If your control panel is maximized, you will also see the questions pane. If you have a question, please feel free to ask it here at any time throughout the presentation. We will then ask that question at the end of the presentation. Using the audio pane, you can click on Settings to view and select any of your available audio devices. You can also use this pane to change to using your telephone. If you lose audio at any time, please use the telephone function and follow the prompts after you call the number that is in this location on your GoToWebinar application. I would also like to remind you that you can download the app for GoToMeeting to view future webinars as well. And finally, if you are having technical difficulties, please email me or call me using the email and number on your screen. You can also use the questions pane to get my attention. Our recording should also be available on the Center for Excellence by Wednesday of next week. Also, following this webinar, I will be sending a short survey to all participants. If you could please fill that out, it will be used to get a count of the number of people that joined our webinar and will provide you an opportunity to give us additional feedback. And now I will hand it over to Ray to begin the webinar.
Thank you, Jordan, and welcome everyone to this training webinar. I think we have two different groups, and we have a fairly large group that's at least registered for this webinar. We have a group of users that have the Cow Manager system that is looking to learn a little bit more about their system. And then we have a group of dairymen and producers that are looking to possibly purchase the Cow Manager system to take a look and see what kind of functions are available. So if we get started, as this is the dashboard that's available, and this is a live herd that we're using today for training. It's a fairly large herd that's had the system for 2 years, and so this is the dashboard that's now showing all the alerts. So we have both the health alerts and the heat alerts showing on the dashboard. If we first go to the heat alerts and look at those cows by just clicking the In Heat button at the top, now we have just the cows that are shown with a heat alert. A few things that you can do is if you go up to Group and right-click and then sort by ascending order, we'll now have the cows sorted by the 4 cows that are in Group 4, the 4 cows that are in Group 5, the 4 cows that are in Group 6, and the 3 cows that are in Group 7. Now, if you're wanting to make a list of just the cows in Group, let's say, 6 to print and then bring out to the farm, just hit pin 6, like I did that's highlighted, hit In Heat, and now we have the 4 cows in pin 6. And if you look over on the upper right, there's 2 icons, a print icon and an Excel icon. So if you hit the print icon, you'll now have a sheet with the 6 cows that are in pin 6 that are on a heat alert. So if we take a look at these 4 cows, the first cow is 79 days in milk. She's still increasing in activity. The first number is her present activity level, so it's 6.5 times her baseline. The next number after the dash is the highest activity, and that's why I'm saying she's still increasing with the up arrow says she's still increasing in activity. And then the number in parentheses gives you the number of hours that she's been on the list or since the initial alert. So she's been on the alert list for 8 hours. If we take a look at that animal by left-clicking anywhere on that line, we first bring up this list. That's that individual cow, which you can see her number, her date of birth, her days in milk, her age, her calving date, and her last insemination date, which was 7 days ago. And over here on the bottom screen, we have the sensor that she's linked to when it last synchronized, which was about an hour ago, and that she's in the special needs barn. So that's kind of interesting that she's in the special needs barn. At least that's where it was picked up, the antenna was picked up. So if we then click on activity, because this is a cow that's suspected in heat, that will bring up the graph that shows her activity level. And this graph will have two lines, a red line and a blue line. The red line is her raw activity count. So it's the activity that's normal walking to and from the milking parlor to the feed bunk to the free stalls. And then the blue line is her in heat line. It's a line that goes back 7 days to look at her baseline. For every hour, it says what was her activity for this particular hour, which would be 5 o'clock Eastern time for the last 7 days. So you can see this cow was in heat, high activity 7 days ago. So if we come over to the left panel, we have that she's in heat today, as we went over already. She came in at 7 o'clock this morning, so it's been 8 hours. She was in high activity 7 days ago, and she was there for 13 hours, and that's this graph here. And you can see where they inseminated her, probably a little bit late on insemination because you can see her peak, and she was really out of estrus when she was inseminated. And then the time before, it was 22 hours. So from today's date to this peak was 22 days, so pretty much on cycle. This is the odd one that was right here. So we have two lines. The red line is the raw activity to tell you how much she's walking, how much activity. This would be important for pin changes, for group changes, for hoof trimming, that it would be an occurrence that doesn't happen every week, every 7 days. And then the blue line would be your in heat line. If we take a look at the next cow, by just hitting the right arrow, we'll scan over to the next cow on the that was in heat alert. So this is 2158. 2158 is 226 days of milk. And so you can see here she was bred a few times. This activity is, she's already coming down, and there's two colors you can see here. The light green baseline is at 2.85. So 2.85 would be that this, to get to this light green, says she has to be 2.85 times more active than her baseline. This is pretty close to where the baseline was in our other activity systems that we marketed. And in the dark green is a little bit higher. That baseline is at 2.5 or 2.5 times her activity, or for a heat state, I'm sorry, it's 2.85 and 3.5 for the dark green. So 2.85 for the light green and 3.5 for the dark green. So you can see she was preg-checked here, open. She was inseminated here, and then she has a blip that we need to go check out to see, is this animal in estrus, or because it's only been a few days since her last alert. And if we take one more look before we go back to the main dashboard. So this cow here, 21221. You can see a number of activities where she was preg-checked here, open. She was inseminated just a few days before, but I guess they checked her because she was checked open here and then again inseminated here. So It's interesting, this must have been a timed AI because you can see there's no activity that showed up. And then roughly 3 days after the timed AI, she did have a peak in activity, and then there's another peak in activity today. So again, this would be the heat alert that you can scan. What I want to show you up here is that you can look at the last 4 days, 25 days, or 50 days. So just if we hit 25 days and hit the refresh button, just the last 25 days, and then we can look at that a little bit closer. So that's your options in the drop-down box for days. And there is also, you can see there's a calendar that you can pick any start date and ending date that you would like. So here we have just the last 25 days. So you can see here she was bred pretty early, almost exactly when she started in heat. Here's when she was inseminated 9 days ago. And then here's when she was inseminated on timed AI. So 9 days apart is not uncommon in a timed AI situation. On a repeat, a cow that was timed AI and not synchronized, and then we have this event here. So if we go back to the cow list, we can sort that group to get a certain pin. We can get all the cows that are on the heat alert. First, we need to click off of pin 6. And here's all the cows with a heat alert. The other thing is we can move these categories. Say that we want our alerts right up front. You just left click and then drag it to where you would want to position it. Now, if that's where you want to keep it, you have to hit the Save Settings button that's up here, so you save this setting that your alert would be here. The other thing is if you right-click, you can see columns, and say this was heifers. Well, for heifers, we don't want to see lactation value. We don't want to see, that might be it. We might not want to see lactation number, but we might want to see rumination and eating minutes. And so here's where you can customize what's on your dashboard. Again, by right-clicking in this column. So if we go up to this column, right-click, come over to columns, you can then click on what values you want here to show up on your dashboard to customize it. So you can customize your dashboard, you can move around items, you can sort. The other way to sort would be to grab the filter button in orange, bring that over, let's say, to group, and then let's see. We have a sort button that we're going to down sort, or you can see now that it's been sorted from the last alert to the most recent alert, or if we click on that arrow again, we'll have it from the most recent alert at the top, and the first alert to show up here was at 127. So if we move on to the health modules, and again, there's 3 different heat alerts before we move on. The light blue, it's a suspect cows. It's only the first 2 hours, so you'll only see, you can see in parentheses 2 hours for all 3 of these. These are below the baseline based on the interval. That might be a cow of interest or not. So this cow's 333 days of milk, probably not interested. This cow's 226 days of milk. And this cow's 69 days of milk. So of the 3 suspect cows, this would be the only one that I would go review. And so see, she sees 69 days of milk. If we look at her activity, You can see that it came up, came back down again, and again, because she's 69 days in milk, there's been no activity prior to this that the tag's been on. So this is a fairly normal pattern, and she did break into the green eventually. So I would definitely go look at this cow. You can see she was in heat 31 days ago. So 31 days ago would have been 38 days in milk. So that's not uncommon to have an irregular heat cycle early with early days in milk. So I think that covers the in heat alerts. So if we go back and look at the health alerts, again, if we press the button on the top toolbar for health, now we just have the health alerts, and you can see that there's a few interesting alerts here. There's actually 3 alerts that are available. The suspicious, which we see here in orange, the sick, which we don't have any present today, and then the very sick that we see 2 of them. So to practice, if we come over to days in milk and we do the sort ascending, so we'll have the fresh cows at the top, and we have probably 2 cows that are calving. You can see they both were dried off on December 4th and December 11th. So my suspect that we'll look at these, that they're calving. We also have 3 temperature alerts. Now, a temperature alert does not trigger a cow onto a heat alert. The heat alerts, the health alerts are determined by a decrease in rumination and an increase in resting time or non-activity. So a slight decrease in rumination would go into a suspect. An increase level of resting time with a greater decrease in rumination would be a sick cow, and then the very sick cows would have a greater decrease in rumination with an increase in resting time. So 3 different sick alerts that are based on 3 different baselines, you'd say. So the health alerts do not trigger a cow onto the alert list, and the reasoning behind that is there's the temperature is actually kind of you might say a secondary indicator, because it's a skin temperature and it's kind of influenced by environment and also placement of the tag. But it can be very valuable, and we'll look at these 3 just to kind of go over them. So the first cow, cow 2905, is 5 days in milk, 4 for lactation. She's in group 3. And now we'll go to the behavior. So clicking the behavior, we have hourly and daily, and you can see this cow's only had, she's 5 days in milk, and they put it on the day before calving. So we'll use a drop-down box and go look at just the last 8 days. Your options are 8 days, 15 days, 25 days, and 50 days. So if we look at the last 8 days and hit the refresh, we'll now get the last, kind of enlarge that graph. So you can see this cow freshened 5 days ago, and she started out okay, but 2 days after calving, she's gone downhill. So what I would normally do is look a little bit closer by going to the hourly graph, and here looking at the last 3 days. And then what I've done is you can click on any of these events you want to look at. So usually for a sick cow, because it's based on rumination and resting time in yellow, and your key is up here, rumination's in blue, eating's in green, yellow is not active or resting, orange is active, and red is high activity or the heat alert. So here you can see 3 days ago she was ruminating fairly well, and then she kind of had a period of low rumination, and she came back with less rumination, more resting, and then today it's gotten even worse. So again, if we want to click on and just look at rumination, we could click off the non-active or resting time. So here we have just rumination, and I think if you draw a line from 125 to where we're at today, that line would be going from around 50% rumination to somewhere around 20% rumination. But I also usually put in the non-active to give me the non-active time or resting time. In the sick alerts, this is what it's based off of, the rumination time and resting time. So this is what I normally want to look at. Again, we can pick any 2 days. If we look here, we could go to, say, January 26th to January 28th. We hit the refresh button, and we should get pretty much the same graph. A little bit different because we got one less day. The thing to remember is you need to click off of this, or this is going to set all your next settings. So I normally would click off. And so let's look at temperature real quick just by hitting the temperature button on the toolbar. We'll have two lines. A green line is the mean for all the cows in the herd. And so let's look, let's look at the last 8 days. So the green line is the mean for all the cows in a herd. The blue line is for that individual cow. So you can see here calving was on 123 5 days ago. And you can see how that cow's temperature, she really took a dive 2 days ago. And she'd kind of come back up, then go back down, come back up, and then she's gotten worse. But it's still temperature. I think if they went out and temped that cow's probably going to have a fever about 103 to 105. So by going forward, we look at the next sick cow. We'll look at her temperature first. Now, not all these cows had a temperature alert, and this cow doesn't. You can see how the blue line parallels the green line. It's not exactly on top of it, but you got to remember the green line is for the 600, almost 700 cows, and the blue line is for that individual cow. So this cow does not have a temperature alert. If we go to her behavior, and we look for the last 8 days, that sick alert was on the 24th and the 28th. So here you can see her resting time increased from 39% of the day to 45% of the day. Then it went back to 38, 39, 38, and what you can see here is a drop in rumination so far today. So again, if we go hourly and we look the last 3 days, in fact, this button is still on. You can see that rumination was good through this time period, and for the last 4 hours, it's kind of dropped off. So this cow is a suspect cow, and probably to look at her, she might have subclinical ketosis. Might not be anything you could see with visually if you looked at that cow, but there's something going on that I think would be good to go look at her. We'll look at one more cow here on the sick alerts. Normally I'd start off on the daily. And again, you can see this cow, her resting time decreased here, but because of she was in heat. If you look at the dark red, her normal high activity was 5%, 3%, 2%, 4%, 2%, and 2 days ago it was 15%. So 15% of the day she was in high activity, which decreased her resting time. Also dropped her rumination slightly, but then her resting time went up, and then today her rumination is back down. So if we go to hourly and look at the last 3 days, it'll be interesting because here you can see a drop in rumination that was probably caused because of high activity, and if we click that one on, I think it'll confirm it that when we had high activity, let's click them all. I think it, when we had high activity, the cow is not eating as much, and of course she's ruminating less. So in this graph you can see the period of high activity and then the period of decreased rumination. It might show up good here. You have to pick what screens that you'll get comfortable with, but here you can see the high activity associated with when this cow was in estrus. And today she's 72 days of milk, so here she was 70 days of milk. And you can see here she has a reduced rumination level. Again, probably not a sick cow, but a suspect cow. So again, going back to the dashboard, we could go, probably most of the times you would not have it on all cows, but what I want to show you here is this herd has the nutrition module. If you look on top, the modules that are highlighted are the modules that are active in your system. So fertility, health, and nutrition are highlighted for this herd. So they've opted for 3 modules, and we'll look at the nutrition module. There's some interesting things to see in this herd. Find My Cow is not available today, and we hope it'll be available in the second quarter of this year. And an analysis program will probably be the third quarter of this year, the third to fourth quarter. There's a lot of other projects that need to be done before the analysis program. What's interesting here is if you look at rumination minutes, this is the average for the 667 cows. It is 591 minutes. It's also sorted from the top to the bottom. So this cow here, 21,270, 1,142 rumination minutes, which is extremely high. And so this would correlate to probably your highest milk-producing cows. And if you sort it the other way, you're going to get the low ruminating cows at the top of the list. And again, might give you some alerts. And you can see, so this cow here, which has a very sick alert and a temperature, and it makes sense. You can see 4 of the 5 lowest rumination is cows that are on a sick alert. The cow that's not on the alert is actually increasing in rumination minutes. So the plus sign means at least a 10% increase in rumination over the previous 24 hours. So this cow, 21,078, is plus for rumination and plus for eating. So she's not does not have a sick alert. It's also common that you see the cows that are in high activity or in heat are also decreased in rumination. So it's not uncommon to see the sick cows to be some of the lowest ruminators. That makes sense. And then some of the cows that are in heat, that would also be on this side of the ledger because of the time spent high activity, less time at the feed bunk. So I think I'll see what questions we have on the heat alerts and health alerts, but that's really the backbone of both of those modules to tell you what cows you need to do something with. So if we move over to this panel here and take some time to go through it, the second panel down is input panel, and of course we can add cows, and if we click on it, the required fields are the cow's number and her birth date. Now the more data that you put in, the more information you'll have as far as a freshening, lactation number, etc. Now I'll show you where you will know that you're linked with your software management program, which the vast majority of the programs are PC-DART and DairyCom. The DHI Plus should be coming online soon, and we have one herd that's AgSource that we're working with AgSource to get the link there. We also have a herd that's a GIA herd, so the GIA herd is linked with their GIA software, and it comes over daily. For group management, what happens here is you can actually change what pin or what group she's in. So you could select a cow, let's say if we open up, there's 76 cows in group 3, and so if we wanted to change cow 2240 to another group, we could highlight her and then drag her to whatever group we want to move her to. So we just highlight the cow and drag her to the group. If we wanted to move her to group 8, we could just drag her and move her to group 8. Now, in your software management program, when you link with the software, and if you have your pins are correct, it will change. But this is a way that you can do it here. is to actually change groups by picking what group you want, select a cow, and then actually drag it to the group that you want to move her to. The next section is really interesting, is that where you can put group events. So we can do it for all lactating cows. We can do it for any one of the pens is groups, is you can say what event happened. And this will show up in the nutrition, which we'll go into next. Say that we opened a new silo. Well, the whole herd would be affected. So we'd come here and put lactating cows, and then we'd put what date that occurred. So just open the calendar, and when did that occur. And over here you could put open new silo, or you could say a new feed wagon. So it's a way to put in your records an event that occurred that affected the whole herd. So group events, or a certain group. So say group 5, and there is a group 5 in this area. Say that group 5 was had a foot trimming on today. So we could go in and hit today, group 5, and put foot trim. So foot trim would be in all the cows for group 5. Linking, if you're linked with your software management program, all the cows should show up here. So you can see this herd has 1,236 cows in the software management program. And then you would basically link it with a sensor. And they have 108 sensors that are available to be used right now to put on cows. So they could pick a cow, highlight that cow, and then come over and highlight the sensor, and then hit linking, and it would link those two together. To take a tag off, just the opposite. So a cow is culled, or you no longer want to monitor, you just pick the cow, and it automatically has that sensor. So you pick the cow and the sensor, and you hit delinking, and it takes that sensor off of that cow. Okay, so the question comes up, how do I remove a cow from the software? So if you go, again, say this very sick cow, I'm predicting the future here. So I go into her events, and I put out of herd. So to delete that cow from the herd, I just click on that cow, go to events, and put out of herd, and she's deleted from the herd. So it's a way to delete her from the software. You can see there's a lot of other events that you can pick from. So if you want to use this as a kind of a software management program, now most of you will have your health events in PCDART or Dairy Comp or DHI Plus, but if you don't have, and we have a number of herds that do not have a software management program, you can use this event tab to enter calvings, dry-offs, flushes, abortions, and estrus, many different events you can see here that's already in this pick list. Okay, so we've gone through add my cow, group management, group events to add, linking and delinking. This herd has the nutrition module, is one of the reasons I picked it to use today. And so if we go to the group overview, in this graph here, you'll see it has the high activity, which is in red down here. It has the active, which is in orange, the non-active or resting, which is yellow, the eating, which is green, rumination, which is blue, and feed factor. So say we're not interested in a high activity, active, non-active, and eating. We just want to look at rumination and the feed factor, and I'll try to explain the feed factor just a little bit. So here we have, this is for all lactating cows, and we're looking at days here, so it goes back from January the 3rd to the 27th, but if we wanted a different time frame, say we want to look back this fall and pick September 1st to January 2nd, we hit refresh. So now we're going to look over that time frame, and we'll have these two graphs as far as rumination and feed factor. Now, the way it was explained is that you want consistency, so you have these ups and downs, but this is the whole herd. So let's look at an individual group. So if we look at a group, again I said group 5, if we refresh, you can see that the feed factor rumination was very close. And you look at rumination now for this group is up to 10 hours per day. If we look at the dry cows, the rumination is at 9 hours per day. And you can see there's a lot more variability. There's a lot more changes in the dry cows. So the transition program is what I would be concerned with in this herd. And definitely there's different pins, but the transition, dry cows were down to 8 hours a day ruminating. There's a lot of spikes in here. It would have been interesting if they used the events to what might have occurred back in October. There's another big drop right around Thanksgiving. And it's still not as smooth as what you would like. If we go back to pin 5 and refresh. So remember, this is 9 hours per day ruminating for the dry cows. And you can see how this line is much more consistent. And it's 10 hours a day. Okay, so what's feed factor? Feed factor is some research that was done by nutritionists in the Netherlands that combines rumination, eating, in non-active or resting time. And so those three factors are put together in an algorithm to come up with what they feel is more accurate than just rumination. So they're still working with this, but it's interesting that this feed factor you can see is lower but parallels, and again, consistency is the key. The next graph that you get in the nutrition module is associated with an event. So again, I've clicked off of, if I click off of non-active and look just at rumination and feed factor, the yellow horizontal bar is when cows calved in this herd. So you can see the drop in rumination, pretty great, from about 8.5 hours the day before calving to just barely over 6 hours the day of calving, and then the gradual climb after calving. So you can see here 7 days after calving is when it kind of plateaus out. So again, this is the steady about 50 minutes per day for the first 7-day increase that we see with cows after calving. And again, you can see pretty much the same line here. So there's more variation in the feed factor, which again, because it's associated with resting time, that rumination has just the minutes per day ruminating. So again, interesting information. Again, the analysis module is not available yet. Find My Cow is not available. On settings, we have user settings and management settings. The user settings are pretty much set. The language, I think most of you would probably want English. Most of you would probably want Fahrenheit. And on farm, this is where it's supported and set. And the time zones. The time zones also, you cannot change the time zone. It's not correct. You need to let your specialist know, let King Smith and myself know, and one of us can change that for you. Management settings, and very few of you have actually changed or worked with this. And so close-up cows, minimum days since last breeding. No heat alerts for cows who do not breed. Now, they've turned that off, so if cows who do not breed, they don't want a heat alert, they're not going to breed her. No heat alerts for pregnant cows, they've left that on, so if a cow's been diagnosed pregnant, she comes in heat, they'll get an alert. For cows within the voluntary waiting period, you can see 55 days for first lactation, and then 14 for young stock, 14 months. So these are settings that you can set for your herd to customize. The next setting is a multi-view, and you can see because of the size of this herd and that they've had it for over 2 years, that we've let different individuals, and they've allowed us to put Chris Hatch is a specialist out in California, myself. Phil Dieter is the specialist there in Wisconsin. Lau Cruz, of course, vice president for marketing and training, and Liz is a specialist in Pennsylvania. So you can select your, and I think this is their nutritionist up here, and he didn't want the system information. I guess he doesn't care if the system's working or not, but you can see he can get fertility, nutrition, health, the app, and the system information, and note that system's up. You can also see when the last time someone looked at the system. So I can come here and see that Liz looked at it today. Lyle looked at it on the 19th. Last time Phil looked at it was 23rd. Now, mine and King's will not show up because we have a super portal that we can look at all the herds and that we kind of oversee, and so the last time we looked at it will not show up. System status, this is where you can see that they have 3 routers and 1 coordinator. They've labeled those. I guess a point to mention here, anywhere as you see a pencil, you can left click on that pencil, and a little box will come up, and that's a box where you can put in label for office or special needs, dry cows, big barn. So anywhere's in the program where you see a pencil, you can actually, a box will pop up so that you can add a comment to. So you can see the last time it checked in was at 4:37, which was about 5 minutes ago. And then for the routers, you can see it. For the sensors, there's 783. We said there's 100 and something that's not on cows, so that here you can see some that are not assigned to cows. And this drop box here, if you wanted to see 50 at a time, it now allows you to go through and see 50. And so if I go to the most recent, you can see the last sensor to check in was 12 minutes ago. And so some of these sensors must be in the office. Some of these must be off-site where they're not checking in. Up here you can see when it's last synchronized with your software management program. You can see this herd is a dairy comp herd. It last checked in today at 10:33 a.m. Dairy comp, we can, especially for large herds, we can change the settings so that I have it check in 2 or 3, 4 times a day. Right now for PC Dart, it actually sends new data over at 11 o'clock at night. If it's a standalone PC Dart, of course, it's not communicating with DRMS, so those have to be manually sent over in the management option in PC Dart. One of the last things I'll show you here is if you click on Network Summary, what will come up is you can see the PC, and so there's the coordinator, here's the router in the big barn, here's the router in the special needs, and then the third router, dry cows. So the number on the right-hand side will tell you the dry cow barn, they have 96 cows that have sensors or are checking in with sensors in the dry cow barn. In the special needs barn, 193. Now, cows in the big barn, if they're close enough to the special needs, they could check in there. And then cows in the big barn, there's 389. And there was actually 106 that checked in directly with the coordinator. So that tells you where they're checking in. So say you have a router, you come here and it says that no cows are checking in at that router. Well, to me it says we need to move that router in a place where the cows can, sensors can communicate with that router. So very interesting tab here in the settings. And again, green checks, everything's communicating. The red X's, they're not communicating. I think that's all I had. We've been here for 45 minutes, so we've allotted about 15 minutes for questions. So I think Jordan will go ahead and take questions now.
All right. All right, thank you, Ray. We will now begin the question and answer portion. Again, if you have a question, please use the chat function in your GoToWebinar application. I will ask the questions in the order I receive them. All right, the first question is, can you designate which pens are milk pens so you can enter an event for lactating cows and it shows up in all milk strings when you look at them individually? The event will show up?
The pins up here, let me see, if we go back to the input in group management. As far as I know, you'll have to remember what pins are what. There is a pencil here, so you could put for group 2, you could label that as a lactating group or fresh group or far off group. So if it has a pencil next to it, instead of a group number, you're going to have a name put by it. So this is where you would label that, the different pins or groups.
All right. The next question is, what happens if cows leave the farm for the first 30 days of the dry period, then return? Battery, data, question mark.
Okay, so the new sensors, the smaller R6 sensors, can store data for 19 days. The old the R5 sensors that we used on a lot of the promo herds can only store data for 48 hours. So if it's one of the larger R5 tags, after 2 days, they won't be able to collect any more data. The smaller tags will only be able to collect data for 19 days. And so they do try to check in, and after a certain period of time, they go to sleep if they can't check in, if they're looking for a router to download the information. So after a period of time, they'll just basically go to sleep until they check in periodically, and when they find a router, then they'll download the information. So it's not like you'll run the battery down sufficiently. You will use the battery some, but there is a safeguard, so it actually goes to sleep mode after and sends a periodic signal, say like maybe every 4 hours instead of every 15 minutes.
The next question is, can we change the threshold for cows/heifers that show up under the In Heat tab?
No, the thresholds are set, and like I said, there's 3 thresholds. Oh, actually 2 thresholds if we take another look here. And I tried to show you that. This is a unique program in that all the other programs that I know of have 1 threshold. And that's why we changed thresholds for Select Detect. Heat Time did not allow us to change thresholds. They do have a summer setting, so we can tell them to change the summer setting, and these thresholds will be lowered. So right now, a cow will show up when she's in this area in the first 2 hours as she's increasing, but this threshold of 2.85 would be the first threshold, and there's a lot of research that say if we lower the threshold, you're going to get a lot of false heats. And then the dark green would be a lot higher threshold that we see. And again, I think in the cooler weather, we'll see more cows in the dark green. So no, we can't change thresholds. We actually have 3, the below 285, 285, and then 3.5.
All right. Next question is kind of related. We have had some heifers standing in heat that don't show up on the heat list right away. Anything we need to change?
I don't know how many routers you might have, so might need another router. Think about, and again, I don't know how many sensors you have. Only 1 signal can go in at a time. So as a herd gets larger, we would need more routers to collect all that information fast. We can still collect information, but there might be a delay in certain sensors. So, not every animal that has to have a sufficient amount of information to show up on the activity list. You could come there if you see her in heat and see if you see the red line, which is her normal activity, and then the blue line, which is her in heat activity, and see what that shows you. Or the other thing would be to add another router so we could hopefully not catch two tags at the same time.
All right, next question is, on the nutrition module in the example you showed, why might be the reason for the feed factor and rumination being farther apart most recently?
The biggest factor we were told was resting time. That has the biggest influence on the feed factor. And so as they change, you can see here the change is that the change in resting time. So if we click that in there and see how that changes, and it's increasing. So you can see resting time here was about 6 hours a day, and now it's 7 hours a day. So it has changed, and so here they were right on top of each other, and then here there's that increase in an hour. You can see that difference. So what we were told is the resting time or non-activity time has probably the biggest influence on why these two lines are not the same.
Next question is, do the tags fit over buttons from Holstein, or do you need a special button in the cow's ear?
Really can't answer that one. I haven't tried it on the Holstein button. I guess we'd have to try it first. We're going to be coming out with a new blue button that's non-RFID. It's been reinforced. It should be stronger. It's not an all-flex button. It's a button that he's sourced, Aegis has sourced, that we should have available soon. It's a good topic to talk about real quickly, is that we are not recommending that you put it on an RFID button that's been in the cow for some time. So most herds that are using RFID, those buttons were put in when they were calves. So now we come back 4, 5, 6, 7 years later and add up 22 grams to that button. We're asking for increased loss rate or failure rate. So if those buttons have been in the cow for any length of time, it would be better if we can use one of the non-RFID buttons. If you're tagging for the first time with an RFID button, then I don't think it's nearly as much of the same problem.
I don't have any more questions showing up, Ray, so guess we'll wait around for about a minute to see if there's any more questions. But do you have anything else anything else you want to mention before we head out?
I just got a message from King that said the Holstein RFID tags are all flex tags. So the answer would be yes, the Holstein RFID tags should work. That came in by King Smith. Let me see, I did have some notes that I guess for the health alerts is the biggest questions I've gotten from producers is what triggers the health alerts. And so from users that's been on the system for a while, the suspicious cows are going to be mainly subclinical cows, which means visually you won't be able to detect. But a number of them have treated with electrolytes or electrolyte therapy and have seen nice response. The sick cows are much less active and increase the yellow bar with greatly reduced rumination, or the blue bar. And what's been seen the most is a moderate metritis, ketosis, some cases of mastitis, acidosis, some diarrheas, and lame cows normally show up in the sick category. You think about it, a lame cow would have reduced rumination and increased non-active or resting time. And in the very sick cows, of course, we have serious reduced activity and serious reduced rumination. And very often these cows are calving. We saw 2 of them today because of the reduced feed intake and resting. But other disorders, we've seen, dairymen have seen displaced abomasum, severe mastitis, many times E. coli mastitis, milk fevers that appear in the very sick cows. So I guess that's something I kind of wanted to go over because it's a question I get mainly from people that are just starting on the system is what should I be looking for with these different health alerts?
All right, the next question is, I see cow manager tags that get in front of the ear tag. Does this interfere with the temperature readings?
Excellent question, and the answer is yes, because now you're reading the temperature of the tag. There is a cow that's that's in this list that was interesting. She had a temperature alert, and it was on top of an ear tag. Let me see if I can find her. I went over and looked at all these cows earlier, and it's a good example for what this question's about. Not this one. We looked at her. Okay, so you can see the green line, and the blue line, which is the individual cow, is above the green line. So what's happening here is this cow's sensor tag, is probably on top of the ID tag. However, you can see when she had a large drop in temperature, and has had it now for about 2 days, that it did send a temperature alert. And I've had a dairyman tell me that the tag was on top of, very similar to this here, the blue line was above the green line, meaning it was on top of the ID tag, but when she had a drop in temperature, it was recorded. So don't ask me exactly what happened if it spends a certain period of time off the ID tag, because it should be reading the temperature on the ID tag. But it will, having the sensor tag on top of the ID tag, will interfere with temperature reading.
All right, the next question is, can you go over what the first 2 numbers are under the in heat state one more time?
So we'll look at a few cows here. The first cow, 2392, she's still increasing. We have an arrow. You can see the arrow for these 4 cows is going up. The arrow for most of the cows is going down. So arrow going up means that she's still increasing in activity. So the first number is her present activity level, where she's at presently. After the dashed line, it is her peak activity level. So you can see all the cows that are going up, these 2 numbers are the same. For the cows that are going down, the second set of numbers is always larger than the first set of numbers, because this is where she's at now. This was her peak of activity. And so the first set of numbers is where she's at now. The second set of numbers was her peak of activity, which a cow that's got an arrow going up, they're going to be the same. And then in parentheses, it's the number of hours since the first alert.
All right, next question is, how do you see if you are receiving data? How do you get this on your phone?
Well, on your phone, the user should be able to have it on his phone. To get it on a phone, to get the app, if that's the question, you need an Android phone. Go to Google Stores, look for Cow Manager, and it's a free app, and then you have to put in your ID and password. And then so you would get that. If you're a nutritionist, a veterinarian, or a specialist, a select sire specialist, again, the MultiView would allow you to get the, if we click off app, it allows you to get the app. So it only on Androids. iPhones will probably be They're telling me now 9 months to a year. So Android phones only. You got to go to the Google store and at the Google store, then look for Cal Manager and get the Cal Manager app. It looks just like this logo, the Cal Manager logo, and then put in your ID and password, and you would get the app to report to your phone.
All right, the next question is, what is the ROI?
What is the ROI, the return on investment?
Yeah.
Return on investment, what we've seen for most herds is probably less than 2 years, but it's dependent. And I think what we've learned is the health module will return faster than the heat module. The in-heat module, a lot of that depends on where we're at today. In fact, if you give me a second. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
So this was a spreadsheet, a calculator that was developed by Victor Kerber, University of Madison. It's widely used. So you take your present pregnancy rate. So let's say the national average is 17. What we've seen with a herd with 17 is that we can normally see an increase of about 4 pregnancy rates. So if we go to 21, we would see about a $75 per year increase. Now, a lot of the herds that have purchased Cal Manager are above average herds. So say we're at 22 and say we go to 24, we're saying that's $29 per cow per year. So that's kind of the return that you see from where you're at now to where you're going to go in 12 months with a pregnancy rate. However, for health events, if for decreasing severity of the event or saving a cow from dying, if we say today a cow would cost you $2,000. I've had a dairyman that said in the last 3 months he's saved 4 cows. So that's, $8,000 that those cows would have probably perished if it wasn't alerted as early as he was with Cal Manager. So there's standards that's been put together mainly through veterinarians at universities for the cost of both lost milk in treatment, for ketosis, metritis, all the common fresh cow diseases, and of course dead cows. And so that's what I'm saying. The health events will pay off quicker when you put that in. So you have to say it's kind of hard to give a blanket recommendation because where are you at now? But for most herds, the return on investment we've seen is probably close to a year and a half, but most all herds are less than 2 years.
All right. The next question is, when will the iPhone be able to work with Cal Manager?
Okay, I said that earlier. Probably what they're telling me is 9 months to a year. The thing is that you have to submit it to the Apple stores, and the Apple stores actually approve every app. Google does not have an approval process. So Google, you'll see a lot more, there's a lot of apps because there's no approval process. So the iPhone, they're still looking at 9 months to a year to be available on iPhone.
Will an ID tag affect a heifer's activity signals that are sent to the router? We do not need the rumination or nutrition.
ID tag. You mean?
It says, will a yellow ID tag affect a heifer's activity signals?
No. Well, it depends if they interfere with the movement of the sensor. Most ID tags, it will lay right on top of it, either on top of the sensor or behind the sensor, and I don't think that would interfere. If it actually, as a cow moves, it attenuates the movement of the sensor, then it would interfere. I mean, there's a better chance of interference than if there's no tag there, but I'd say a lot of cows, if the tag normally lays below or on top of and doesn't move the sensor, when a cow moves, it shouldn't interfere.
Right. Next question is, when would you recommend to breed a heifer, i.e. in heat state?
Excellent question that I was expecting. Research that we've done and others have done for conventional semen would say that we have about a 10-hour window of optimum conception. So that would be no earlier than 6 hours from the onset and before 16 hours. So that 10-hour window would be optimum. Now, it's not zero before or after. There's just a slight decrease. So think of it as a bell-shaped curve, and so the top of that bell is 10 hours. There's some interesting data coming out on sex semen that would say, and all this work that I know of has been done in jerseys, but in sex semen to wait 20 hours, so 20 to 28 hours is what the last report I got from Dr. Ricardo Chabel, who's done most of this work with sex semen, and we're looking at collaborating with Ricardo, probably with Holsteins and different bulls. But for sex semen, you'd want to delay that, getting it closer to the time of ovulation. So probably 20 to 26 or 28 hours would be for sex semen. But there's limited research. It's all in jerseys. For conventional semen, 6 to 16 hours would be the optimum. And there's really not different for heifers. Heifers actually have a bigger window. Their fertility is higher. Cows have a little bit, a 10-hour window. Heifers probably have closer to a 16-hour window.
All right, the next question is, will the system run off Google Chrome, or do we need Windows 7?
Well, you need Windows. Google Chrome is just a server. So like an Explorer, Google is not an operating system. Google is a
website browser.
A website browser. So your operating system is what you'd want. Vista, we prefer if it's Windows 7 or higher, but it will work on Vista. We know it will not work on XP. So the XP computers are not being supported by Microsoft, and I think that's one of the main reasons it will not. They have got it so it will not work with Cow Manager.
Next question is, where exactly should the sensor be placed on the ear? Have you seen others skip their ID ear tag completely in that ear, or use a smaller tag, etc., without losing either sensor or ID tag?
Ideally, it should be in the middle of the left ear between the two cartilage veins, ideally. It can be in the right ear, and ideally in the middle of the ear. If there's a ID tag in the middle of the ear, it is better to come closer to the head. However, if you get too close to the head on the left side, you will affect the movement. The movement of the ear is not as optimum, and so you're going to reduce rumination time and reduce readings. On the right side, on the right ear, if you're close to the head, you're going to affect the signal because the antenna is on that side of the sensor. So ideally in the middle of the ear, ideally on the left side, but the right ear is fine as long as you're close to the middle. ID tags, there's still another ear. A lot of people have two ID tags because a lot of them get lost. And again, if we can have some distance between the blue button that's attached to the sensor and the ID tag would be optimum.
Next question is, how do you see if the information coming into how do you see if the information is coming into Cow Manager? How do you know it's working?
How do you know it's working? So individual that's not very trusting. So let me go back to Cow Manager. So here's if we go to system status, it actually gives you the last time of synchronization. So I went down to the bottom here and said the tag that's checked in, this herd's in Central Time, so it's let's see here. So this tag checked in at 4:58, which was 12 minutes ago. So if we go upward, you can see this count how many tags I moved up. So this is 50 tags 4:57. So there was 50 tags check in between 4:58 and 4:57. Then if I go, you can go to the next and next, but if you go to the tags that have not checked in, so you can see the last time this one checked in was March the 6th of 14. My guess is this tag was lost. And in fact, most all of these, I would guess, are no longer on the farm because it's been months since they've checked in. Okay, some of them have not been delinked. Most of them have, a lot of them have not been delinked. But my guess is, and I think knowing this, some of these the cows were culled and they forgot to move the sensor from the ear of the cow when she left the herd. Now, I've heard that way too often. I've been on 3 herds in the last 2 weeks that the cow was left the farm and they forgot to move the sensor, take the sensor. So that cost them an extra $100 or whatever number of modules. And so that lost is a loss that they admitted that they did not remove the sensor. So right here in synchronization system status, you can check any tag you want. And so you can actually put a tag number up here, or an animal number, and I normally put a tag number or you'd probably normally put an animal number, and then it would come up for that animal. It says when's the last time she was synced. If it has a check mark, it has been synced recently. And let me see. So you can see all these green checks. These are all been synced, and these are all been synced in the last 18 minutes. So now we're talking about 100, 200, 300 tags in the last 18 minutes.
This is kind of just for just clarification, but so he basically asked, so what you are saying on timing is we need to breed when the heifer has been on the list between 6 to 16 hours.
Yes, and for heifers, you actually got a bigger window. So a heifer, it's not as critical, so it probably could go from 4 to 20 hours. If you're using sex semen, though, you want 20 to 26 hours. So sex semen is different than conventional primarily because of the number of sperm in the straw. So conventional semen for heifers, 6 to 16 hours, 10-hour window. For sex semen, probably 20 to 26 hours.
All right. Next question is, how long will a cow stay on a health alert, and what needs to happen for them to come off of the list?
Excellent question. The alerts stay on for 24 hours. And right now you cannot manually take a cow off the list. So that is on the wish list, that there's, after you breed the cow or you treat the cow, that you can click off of her and get her off the list because you've done something with her. Right now, that cow stays on for, across all the systems, 24 hours. It's a standard 24 hours she's on the list. But in our wish list, it's that the user will have the ability to take the cow off when she's bred or treated.
All right, I think that was the last question.
Well, that's almost a half hour of questions, and some really excellent questions. As Jordan said in the beginning, he has a short survey he would like for you to fill out. It's important for our feedback. Are you interested in doing another one of these? Might have a different viewpoint if we get another one of the specialists to have King do the next one for producers. Everyone looks at these records a little bit different, and it's just giving you some ideas on what to look for and how to use your cow manager system.
All right, we got one more question that came in. Do you put breeding in Cow Manager or PC Dart?
Say that again, Jordan.
It says, do you put breedings in Cow Manager or PC Dart?
I would put them in PC Dart if I had PC Dart, because they're going to come from PC Dart to Cow Manager. They do not go from Cow Manager to PC Dart. So if you put them in PC Dart, I mean, they'll eventually come over to Cow Manager. So that's the way it flows from PC Dart or from any of the software management programs to Cal Manager. It doesn't go from Cal Manager to your software management program.
Next question is, what criteria does a cow have to meet to come off the health alert, not necessarily taking her off manually?
If she gets better, I mean, there's some cows that have been on the health category for a number of consecutive days because she hasn't. Let's take a look at this cow. She's been on there on the 25th and 28th, not a good example. But there's some cows that have been on the sick alert, health alert for numerous days consecutively. So if she's still dropping in rumination and increase in resting time, she'll stay on there. If she improves in rumination, she'll come off the alert list.
All right, well, if there are no more questions, we will start shutting down here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Just a reminder that I'll be sending everyone a link to a webinar survey here shortly. If you could please fill that out, it would be very helpful for us to get a count of the number of people that joined our webinar tonight, and so we can get additional ideas for the future. Ray, do you have any closing thoughts?
Nope, just want to thank everybody. I know we had a fairly large number of people that had signed in to attend the webinar, and that's great. I think this is an excellent way that we can do training. And again, in the future, the questionnaire is important so that we know that this was useful, and maybe you might want to put down that can we do one-on-one training where King or I actually uses TeamViewer and come to your herd and at your time frame and do some additional training. That's also possible.
All right, well, thank you, Ray, and thanks, everyone, for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Jordan.